Welcome back to an all-new episode of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. A lot going on this week in the recruiting universe. It's getting to be crunch time for any class of 2022 players who have not yet picked a school. We're going to talk about one of those guys in a planned trip to Penn State a little bit later in this show. But before that, obviously, January is synonymous with junior days, and Penn State has now had two of them, just recently wrapped one up over the weekend. No commitments yet for the Nittany Lions in this month of January, but obviously a lot of good visits so far. Ryan, what's your main takeaway as we kick off this week's episode from the junior day that just wrapped up, which also included, of course, a transfer that we're going to talk about as well?
Yeah. Solid junior day. It wasn't like it was on the 15th and not as deep as what I'm expecting on the 29th. We'll finish this podcast talking about the upcoming junior day. Yeah. What do we have here? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 4-star players and a handful of others who also hold scholarship offers. I think when you look at the top prospect, the top prospect was definitely Neo Avery, who's of course already committed. Would you say Anthony Brown was maybe the top uncommitted prospect? You could throw Kenny Johnson in there.
Yep.
Eric Gardner, I think Penn State has a lot of interest in. I think they just want to see how he grows a little bit. We have him at foot 240, so just kind of curious to see. They think he'd be a defensive tackle, so that's something to watch. Michael Kilbane actually had a really good talk with out of St. Edwards, Lakewood, Ohio. We have him at 6'3.5", 255. He was actually at a wrestling tournament outside of Wilkes-Barre and then hit Penn State on the way back, and they offered him. I actually saw Kilbane play against Drew Aller in the regional final or whatever it was. It was Aller's final game. He had, I think, 2 sacks on Aller that night and a handful of hurries. He was a pretty solid player. I knew at the time he had some MAC offers. I wish I would have watched him, honestly, a little closer. I didn't know he was on Penn State's caliber at the time. But, yeah, I would say just a solid junior day. Out of the 3, this was probably the smallest crowd when it comes to those elite prospects. Matthias Barnwell, of course, committed. Neo Avery, of course, committed. And then you have guys like D. Creighton, Anthony Brown, Kenny Johnson coming up, Eric Gardner, all guys, Ronan Hannafin, too, I should mention, out of Cambridge, Mass. All guys that I think, 1 or 2 of them could emerge down the road as somebody maybe Penn State really pushes for. But out of those guys, there's nobody that I think, Penn State is going all out for at the moment. So I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and, I think it's important to remember, too, that you're going to have – every junior day can't be the world's best, most amazing list of prospects because everybody else is trying to host kids on these 3 particular weekends that they can, in addition to 2022 guys. Some schools dealing with that more than others. But, yeah, a solid group. A couple offers went out that we'll be able to track down the road. We were able to catch up with a couple of guys. Anthony Brown was interesting to me, a guy committed to Minnesota, took a visit to Penn State, and he's small. He's on the smaller side, there's no question. I think he thinks he envisions like a KJ Hamler type role and type career path for him, and Penn State could, of course, sell that to him. So we'll see what happens there. As of this moment in time, January 25th, about lunchtime, he is still committed to the Gophers, but Penn State has interest there. So, yeah, you're right. Not exactly as star-studded as the one before it or the one coming after it, but still, all things considered, we're seeing the benefit for Penn State, getting guys on campus, getting them around the coaches, giving a chance to sit down and talk face-to-face, which, of course, wasn't possible last year. Plus, you have James Franklin and his staff making home visits with guys who are already on campus since they weren't able to do that as well. So it's a busy time of year for these guys flying all over the country, and you take what you can get out of these junior days and hope that it builds for the future.
Couple other guys I want to mention real quick. Cole Serber was an interesting offensive lineman I was looking at. We had him originally at like 6'5", 265, which, that sounds like a tackle. And I think I mentioned with T-Frank the other day, like, hey, look, it'll come back and he'll be like 6'4". And, of course, he was 6'4", which I thought was kind of funny, after I got a little more of an accurate measurement on him. Not that, he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. I think he could definitely get an offer down the road. I know his junior day went well. Penn State seems to really like him, both as a player and off the field. But to me, I was looking at him as maybe a tackle, and then I got back 6'4", 280. That screams more so of an interior guy. Austin Ramsey, too, was another offensive lineman on campus from Roman Catholic in Philadelphia. We have him at 6'3.5", 365, which is a little bit bigger than Penn State usually their target, I guess you would say, for interior guys. I think he's going to be somebody that they want to camp this year. And that's really actually kind of the good way to look at a lot of these guys. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
Austin Ramsey will probably be asked to come camp. I'm not really sure about Anthony Brown. I have to get a better feel for that. Kenny Johnson, I'm torn on that one. I could see them wanting him to camp to get an accurate measurement for his speed, because that's kind of the one thing everybody's been asking about. But a lot of the other things are there. So, is Penn State going all out for him at the moment? I do think there were probably a handful of guys definitely ahead of him. But with him being, Dallas town, with him being up here as many times as he has, I definitely think he's a player who could be part of this class down the road. So same with kind of Eric Gardner. They want to move him maybe more as a defensive tackle. Another guy I could see them wanting to come camp. And just one other player I wanted to mention was Sean Williams, that wide receiver out of St. John's College High. He hasn't gotten an offer from Penn State yet, but pretty solid little offer list he has going on here. Adding Boston College, Duke, Pitt, Rutgers. I mean, he's starting to kind of take off a little bit. I think he added just like 2 or 3 offers since visiting Penn State as well. So I think he could be another player down the road that we're talking about.
Do you think we're going to see more than maybe in normal cycles, more guys having to camp at either Penn State or schools across the country because of just how weird the last 2 years have been? Or have we normalized out here a little bit and it's going to kind of be about the same as it always has been?
I think Penn State always wants everyone to camp. Right?
Yeah.
They want Nicholas Harbour to camp, if they can. It's just more so who wants
We'll
to
see
camp.
if that happens. Right. Yeah. We'll see if that happens. That might be a long shot.
We'll talk about him in a minute. But I think, look, they're going to talk to every one of these guys about, hey, if you want to come up, we'd love to work with you. And that's why we also see guys like Nick Singleton come camp, right? Like Nick Singleton doesn't have to camp, but he wants to work with them, wants to get a better feel for him. So that's why you always see those, 24 or so superstars come camp when you really, they don't need to. And a lot of those guys are always kind of committed by that time too, I should say. But I think we'll just kind of see something normal, right? They're going to want a lot of guys to camp. One other thing I would add too is what happens with the unofficial visit, but can have a private workout, because that's something I know Penn State staff would love to see added. I'm sure Division I coaches all across the country would love for that to continue. And of course that would impact the 2023 class this year. So if the NCAA is able to, make a smart decision, I know everybody laugh, NCAA. But if they can make a smart move, and extend that and make that a permanent thing, it'll have a big impact on the amount of guys they are able to at least work out in person.
Yeah, keep in mind that Sandy Barber's the, I believe, chair now of the Football Oversight Committee. James Franklin's on the board of the American Football Coaches Association. So we know what at least one priority item Penn State will have to push for here over the next couple of weeks and months.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, man. I think that's a great thing for James to be on the AFCA board, because I know he has a lot of kind of, I don't want to say progressive ideas, but he's been around long enough to understand some of the challenges. And I'm not saying, some of the other coaches don't, but I know that's something that will take up time. Not a lot of time, don't get me wrong. They're not meeting regularly or anything like that. But I know that's something that he's happy to be on. And I think he really wanted to be on that board to get his opinion out there more.
Absolutely. Well, this is the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickel. We're moving on now to everyone, and this is going to be a topic for both of the two organizations we've talked about here in the last couple of minutes, but the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. Hunter Nourzad, the Cornell offensive lineman, was able to make it to campus over the weekend. Penn State is now in full court press mode on him. They really think he's a guy that can be a difference maker in 2022, but there's a lot of schools fighting to land him, and at least one that maybe has a little bit better offensive line pedigree, I would say, than what Penn State has over the last few years. But I think Penn State probably has a little bit more to sell in that regard than maybe they get credit for. But what's the latest there? Obviously, I think the first thing we have to note is Penn State, because we were asked this on our Lions Den message board this morning, Penn State has started classes already. And if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Hunter Nourzad doesn't graduate from Cornell in the spring. So if you're thinking at this point,
he does. He does graduate. He will, but he'll be able to join in May. Excuse me.
Right. But so the point being, though, is that if you're thinking that a decision might come soon and these guys will make it here for spring practice, that is not going to be the case. So with that caveat out of the way, where does Penn State stand at this point? And I guess, has your outlook in terms of the chances Penn State has to land him, have they changed appreciably at all over the last couple of weeks?
Not a ton. I mean, I've been thinking for a while this is an Iowa Penn State race, and I still do believe that. I will say that people don't want to rule out Indiana or Illinois, excuse me, and I don't either. But when I really have pushed people and I've said like it's just a Illinois, Penn State, Iowa race, the majority of people I talk to really think it's Penn State and Iowa, but I don't want to rule out Indiana. So let's keep it in Illinois. I keep saying Indiana. I said it again. Illinois. Excuse me. Illinois. We haven't talked about Illinois much in recent years, right?
Why would we? Yes.
Well, we did this past season a little bit. But anyway, so the other two
now,
schools.
And now, is this the part of the podcast where we talk about overtime rules?
Oh, sorry. I'm getting a text at the moment. Sorry if you heard that ping there for a second. But, okay, so Auburn and Virginia Tech were also in the mix. And he did go take an official visit to Auburn. I'm being told that they're not really in the mix all that much now. And Virginia Tech was expected to get him in for a midweek visit, which was pretty much, I think, starting Wednesday or maybe actually Tuesday. It was either way. It was going to start here in the next day or two. I'm being told that's not happening. So the last visit will be Iowa, and Iowa has been considered the favorite for a while now. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out. He was hosted by, I really spent a lot of time with Sean Clifford and Juice Scruggs. I was told that went well. And Phil Troutwine is meeting with him and his family today in Atlanta, on Tuesday, January 25th. So they're going all out. Of course, Franklin did his in-home visit with them last weekend. Told the visit went well, but, without really getting to talk to Hunter, it's kind of hard to get a real feel for, truly where Penn State stands in that hierarchy. But to me, I think it's going to be a Penn State-Iowa battle, but I can't rule out the Illini.
So one other thing that's important to note here is that a lot of the guys in the transfer portal, they don't necessarily see the value or the benefit of doing interviews like high school kids do in a lot of cases. So Mitchell Tinsley was great, right? The current Penn State receiver who committed on Christmas Eve. But, when I was talking to him about it, he was so nonchalant. It was one of the more interesting interactions I've had. He was just like, yeah, I'm going to Penn State, and if you want to announce it, you're more than welcome to. Thinking, buddy, it's your announcement. Have at it. But, but you would not, in almost no case, would you get a high school recruit that has that same mindset. And I think it really illustrates kind of the difference between going through the recruiting process the first time and maybe what's important, and then going through it a second time and maybe what's important. And for a lot of these guys, so you sit here and say, how in the world would Illinois be an option? Well, maybe you think Brett Spielman was the best person to get him to the NFL, and maybe that's all that matters. I mean, you can maybe try and say, okay, you go to Illinois and win a championship. I don't know how you could – I'm not really sure how you could say that with a straight face. And obviously the Illinois fans will say, well, Penn State, they lost to Illinois in 9 overtimes, blah, blah, blah. We won't go too far down that path. But at any rate, certainly I think it goes without saying, and there is simply no question that the way that the first recruitment goes and the way these portal recruitments go are pretty much two entirely different things.
This one's like a maybe like a 2-month process, but many of them are like a 3-week process. And
if that.
And as Franklin, yeah, exactly. And Franklin has hit on in the past. I mean, a good chunk of these guys, I would love to know the percentage. I would estimate like 30% of them maybe already know where they're going when they get in there.
That's low. I would say at least 50. It feels like.
Yeah.
Now I guess the one problem there with my numbers. Go ahead.
It's tough to say. I mean, I've tried to ask this question, and everybody's like, dude, I really don't know. So I'm just throwing 30 out my ass if I'm being honest. But,
my thought process would be that there's so many guys in the portal that don't ever end up anywhere that you're probably right about 30%. But I would say of the ones who do commit elsewhere, if you just make it that pool, man, I would say it's probably in that 50 to 60% range. It just seems like there's more cases like Noah Cain going to LSU like 18 hours after he went in the portal, which Brian Kelly might be fast. He's not that fast.
That was a quick one. That was quicker than most of them. I still think a lot of those guys know kind of where they're going, but I haven't seen too many that were like within 24 hours. At least I don't. Maybe you have. I haven't.
No. So that was one of the – there's been a couple that have been in that ballpark, but that was by far one of the quicker ones I can recall since the transfer portal went into this new age, so to speak, a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. One thing I want to add here, too, with Hunter is that, he has a Cornell degree. Yes, he's a very smart student, and, academics are important. I'm not trying to undermine any of that, but he's going to a Division I school to get to the NFL. Like
Right.
that's what the crux of this is.
That's every recruit, right? Every transfer guy. Yes, right.
I mean, I've seen a lot of people just like on our message board asking about academics and like, oh, what's he going to study? You know, he went to Cornell, so like obviously that's really
Doesn't
important.
matter.
I don't really think that's really important here. I think he's coming here. He's got his undergrad degree, you know, already, you know, in a good spot from a place like Cornell. I mean, he's looking at this as a 1-year tryout to really try and get to the NFL. And of course, you know, whatever he studies will help him towards a master's degree as well. But and that's why I'm curious to see how Iowa plays out here too, because obviously I think out of those 3 schools, they are the best when it comes to getting guys to the NFL. So only time will tell.
No question. Well, again, you know, if you're thinking that he's going to take a couple of trips here and then decide, it could play out that way. But again, he just doesn't have to rush this process at all.
No.
And, you know, he still has to graduate from Cornell before he ends up anywhere. So one final transfer transfer note with a walk-on, Jake Spencer, Colgate receiver, is coming to Penn State. He announced on Monday. We'll see what they do with him. 3 catches, 14 yards, 20 kick returns during his time in 2021 at the Patriot League school. Penn State seems to think they can get some kind of use out of him. We're not terribly sure what that is at this point, but you know, I think the obvious thing that people are going to gravitate to, even though they have no idea if he's ever done it before, is, well, could he replace Drew Hartlob? Could he replace A.J. Litton as a gunner on Penn State's punt teams? Obviously, those are needed, so we'll see, but they certainly seem to have a plan for him. It is important to note, though, it's a walk-on, not a scholarship guy.
Mm-hmm. I haven't watched it really much of Jake. I can sit here and talk and say the same things you have. No disrespect to Jake, but I don't really know what to say about him. We'll see what happens.
Well, let's move on then on the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast is something you do know more about. First, though, we'll tell you about our website. Of course, you know, you follow us, but maybe you don't. Maybe you're just finding this on the Apple Store or YouTube. Maybe you've listened to T. Frank and don't know how to get to the site. You can see it right at the bottom of the video there underneath our faces, which is probably a better place to focus during the video portion of these podcasts. Anyway, but BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, $1 for 1 year of access. If you visit us on our homepage, you're going to look at it right there on the video version of this. 1 year for $1. It's right at the top of the screen. You can't miss it. You'll get access to all the new Penn State information as it happens. Insider video breakdowns from T. Frank, updates from Nate Bauer, David Eckert, Ryan, and I, of course. And you're going to learn from our On3 national team about NIL, about the new On300 rankings, which just were finalized for the class of 2022. So join us. Thank you for listening to the promotional spiel there, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And, you know, we hope to see you over there. You can reach out to us on social media if you have any. If Ryan gets another text. If you have any questions about how to sign up. Okay, moving on here. Penn State.
Hey, let's talk about the On300 rankings real quick. Let's.
It's where we were going next. Yep.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we were getting that in here because, of course, Denai Dennis-Sutton just became a 5-star player for On3, and he really deserved it, man. And of course, you know, we were at Rivals. Of course, he was a 5-star, and you know, we were always pretty high on him. But I really just kind of wanted to see how his season would go, and that's what Charles and our guys were wondering as well. And of course, then he breaks his elbow, and you know, everything gets off to a slow start, and then of course he really takes it from there, and you know, has a great second half of the season with 7 sacks in 7 games, I believe it was, something like that, 40 tackles. He did well, so happy for Denai. He's really earned it, and I'll be curious to see what 247 does here soon. I mean, I could see him being a 5-star at all 3 sites. I believe 247 will announce his situation here. I think pretty soon. I believe they're doing their updates.
So we're in the crunch here where Rivals, 247, On3, ESPN will all be releasing their final rankings. And so that's going to change the way the On3 consensus team rankings look, the way the On3 consensus player rankings look. So keep an eye on that as you hear us talk about these things throughout the year, but especially at this time of year. Everything is subject to change because if a guy is, you know, a 5-star at one recruiting service but drops to a 4-star or vice versa, things are going to get shuffled around. Maybe not in any great way, maybe by just a couple of points, but things can change pretty quickly. I do think that Denai Dennis-Sutton, though, is in the conversation to be an On3 5-star plus player, which is, of course...
Is ESPN in that? In the 5-star plus? I think they are.
Yes.
So we have no idea what... Dude, why is my everybody keeps blowing me up here? I thought I turned my messages off. Sorry, guys. But anyway, yeah, if ESPN makes him a 5-star plus player, that would be that would make him a 5-star plus. But that's the one thing we still have to figure it out. So we will see.
All right. Well, the On 300 is now live. Any thoughts, any surprises that you had from that before we move along here? I mean, 7 guys move up, a couple move down, but I don't really view the guys who move down as any great shock or anything to be worried about. Just the way it kind of worked out. But any surprises on what the rankings ended up being for the final On 300? And before I kick it to you, I will read what those rankings are if I can pull them up, which is not great podcasting, not great videoing, but that's okay. Hang with us here. Let's see. The list was led by Drew Aller, of course, 5-star quarterback at number 7. Running back Nick Singleton, number 16. Denai Dennis Sutton, number 20. Abdul Carter, number 128. He's the start of the 4 stars for Penn State in the On 300. Running back Katron Allen's 151. KJ Winston's 210. Caden Saunders is 223. Drew Shelton, 248. Cam Miller, 251.
No, not really. I mean, I don't really know the move behind Cam and that situation. You know, I'd be a little curious to see or learn more about that. But I mean, the guys all moving up makes sense, right? Katron Allen was excellent at the Under Armour game. Of course, you know, Drew Shelton was he's one of the guys who moved down. I mean, there was kind of mixed reviews on just how much they saw from Drew. I guess, you know, he was the second team guy for the Under Armour game, and you know, there were some people that kind of had just mixed reviews on physically whether he's ready to contribute. And I think that was something we really learned is I don't see Drew really coming here and contributing right away. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And him and Cam are the only 2 that moved down. But having 7 guys move up, of course, KJ Winston had a huge jump. Abdul Carter had a huge jump, and those are guys I was pushing for a long time now. I mean, KJ Winston absolutely earned everything that was given to him over the past couple months. You know, becoming, of course, the the Metro, was it all Metro from the Washington Post, I believe it is.
Yep.
That's just a huge honor for him. I'm really happy for KJ. He earned it, man. I mean, he was the absolute superstar for the Matha when I watched them this year. And of course, Abdul Carter just has those freak numbers that we've talked about so many times, running a 4.5 at 230 plus pounds, and was a 4.4 shuttle too. I mean, those physicality or those physical numbers are just so impressive for someone his size. And that's why I think Penn State will really try to find ways to get him in the mix, whether it's special teams or wherever, as soon as they can.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So Penn State finishes at this very second with a top 10 class of 2022 in the On 3 consensus team rankings rather. At this second as we talk, it's 12:15 on Tuesday, and they still sit at number 7. So just keep in mind, even though the 4-star and 5-star rankings look one way on 3 and the On 300, the consensus team rankings run off of the consensus player rankings. So it may not always match identically both at Penn State and elsewhere. When it says in the team rankings Penn State has 1 4-star, but you then sit there and say, well, Nick Singleton and Denai Dennis Sutton are 5 stars. That's according to On 3. If that changes across the board in the consensus, then you'll see it updated in the team rankings as well.
This week, too, everything's going to be so shuffled for the next 4 days. So just kind of be aware that if you go on it right now, you see 1 5-star player for Penn State. And, of course, Nick Singleton was always, been a 5-star for the last couple months. Well, Rivals kind of shifted their 5 stars around a little bit. That bumped him down a couple spots, and now he is literally the number 1 ranked 4-star player in the country. I think we'll see Rivals move him up from where he currently was in their ratings, and that'll bump him back into 5-star status. And then with Denai, of course, Drew Aller is the one guy who remains a 5-star in the consensus. But then with Denai, like I said, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if 247 makes him a 5-star player. That would make him a 5-star at all 3 sites, and I don't see any way why he shouldn't be a 5-star in the consensus. So it should be 3 5-star players for Penn State when it's all said and done. I think that would make it 12 4-stars and 9 3-stars. And at the end of the day, that's a hell of a class.
No question about it. Well, remember, the On 3 consensus team rankings are the only one out there that weight all sites equally, so check that out, on3.com. You can filter to the football recruiting tab, click on team rankings, and you'll see where the Lions stand both now and in the future. All right, we're coming down the home stretch of this edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast, and we have probably taken too long, Ryan, to talk about Nick Harbour. He's a 5-star, nation's number 13 player according to the On 3 consensus. We have him at On 3 inside of the top 10 overall, top edge rusher, obviously one of the best players in the Mid-Atlantic. he just did something ridiculous on the track. And
Yeah.
it's worth talking about today. He also just caught up with one of On3's writers to our big story about where Penn State and where some other schools stand with him. But what's the latest on him? Where does Penn State stand in this race? And I'm going to put those highlights on now because they're just fun to watch.
He ran a 20:79, which is just insane. I mean, it's the fourth best time ever for a high school athlete in the 200.
Yep.
Yeah, in the 200. So of course it's indoor. I'm not sure if that fourth best time is just for indoor, if it's nationally and including outdoor as well. But 20:79 is just incredibly impressive. And again, he's 6'5", 235. I've said for a while, guys. I mean, this guy is a gem. You know, he's a diamond. You whatever you want to call him, but this is an incredibly special athlete. I mean, there's part of me that still thinks I would really like to watch him in the Olympics someday. So like, there's part of me that kind of thinks like, you know, that should be the way he goes. But all indications are that he wants to play football. Every time I ask Penn State sources about him, that's what they say. And you know, everything we've seen from him, you know, publicly as well is that that's where he wants to play. So I am thinking that he's going to be up here this weekend. I've heard a little bit of mixed things on it, but I know right now Penn State's expecting him to be on campus, which would just be awesome. Of course, his sister graduated from Penn State. I did a story about that a couple months ago, and you know, Penn State's been in the mix for a long time. What I'm really curious to see, of course, is how much track influences his college decision, because he will absolutely continue to run track, as he should. Penn State's track and field is good, but they are not what you have down south in the SEC and, you know, some of those massive schools like Texas and Oklahoma. And, you know, if you're an elite sprinter, like he clearly is, usually you're competing down south somewhere. So how much that impacts his decision, only time will tell. But, you know, he's definitely high on Penn State. He told Billy Embody this week, home away from home, and referring to Penn State. So my dad loves that school. You know, he loves Coach Howe and all the coaches there. You know, he has a great relationship with every coach there, and it's like a second home. So that's a great sign, of course, hearing that from Harbour. And now if he makes it back up this weekend, that'll be a great sign as well. But this is a recruitment that I expect to drag out for a while, because not only is he trying to figure out what college, but you know, there still is a little bit of thought there of, you know, maybe he should go professionally with track.
Well, and keep in mind as well that, you know, and this is not just, you know, it's not just a track thing, but you have an indoor track season, an outdoor track season, and then a football season. Does not leave a whole lot of months on the calendar for college football visits or college track and field visits. So I do think that for that part of that reason, that things could slow down and not maybe go as quickly as you would expect in a recruitment like this too, is because I think he's going to have to really try and maneuver his schedule to make visits work. But super player, obviously a just absurd athlete, a guy who is going to be in the conversation to be ranked among the top players in the class of 2023. And as you mentioned, Penn State certainly seems to have an in with him, obviously with his sister going to Penn State, but you know, time will tell if they can close the deal on this one. Everyone's going to want this guy when all is said and done.
Yeah, last year, that national meet where he ran out in Oregon, that was in July, I think. So, yeah. I mean, that track schedule, I mean, when you run on that kind of level, I think it goes well into the summer. Now, I would expect him to be able to take visits in June, and he did come to Penn State for the Lash Bash, I believe it was, at the very end of July. So he'll find time for visits, but that track schedule is going to keep him busy for sure.
Well, speaking of visits, as you mentioned, he could be up here this weekend. There will be some guys on campus this weekend. Penn State all but set to host its final junior day of January, and that, keep in mind, the contact period ends after this week. No visitors on college campuses in February. I don't know what you're going to do with your time, Ryan. I have some ideas what I'll do with mine. But at any rate, what are we looking at here? We've been teasing now for the better part of like 25 minutes that this is going to be a pretty good group. What makes that so?
Yeah, well, Nick Harbour, of course, I mean, he's the diamond, right? As I say a million times. I mean, he's the guy that every time he's on campus, it's a big deal. But we have a handful of other top guys coming or expected to come. And I would say that Tony Rojas is probably that next guy right now I'm really, truly expecting. Look, we have him ranked nationally in the consensus at number 324. I think if you ask Penn State, they think this guy is a potential top 100 prospect. So really just was excellent at their camp this past year, put up some great numbers. I believe it was like a 6'4", 640, and another really good shuttle, which is similar to Abdul Carter. The difference, of course, is that Tony Rojas is 6'2.5", 200, and Carter, of course, is 230 plus. So that's I think that just speaks to Carter's numbers. But anyone who really runs well and can play linebacker, Penn State's going to be all over. And we have him still listed as a wide receiver, but that's going to change here at 1-3 really soon. I talked to some people about that the other day. He just got back from Virginia Tech as well. But right now I have Rojas as one of their top 3 linebacker prospects, along with Tamir Robinson and Phil Picciotti. So getting him back is big. James Hurd's an interesting prospect I'm expecting up here from St. Joseph's Prep. He's kind of a tweener, 6'2", 220-ish. I think he's a really good player, and he's been excellent at all these camps. But just where exactly does he fit? And positionally wise, that's really what he's an edge, but at 6'2", 220, that's not really what Penn State looks for. Similar to Eric Gardner, but I do think Penn State has him a little bit higher on their board. Jamil Lyons, another Roman Catholic prospect, is of course Austin Ramsey I mentioned earlier. He's from Roman Catholic. He was up last weekend. Jamil Lyons I've been talking about forever. He was another guy who just crushed it at their camp last year, and they wanted to see if he could improve a little bit academically, and he has been. And that's why I think you're also starting to see more and more offers pour in for Jamil over the last week or two. So that's a positive sign. We can keep going on, man. Sadir Mitchell expected up. Antonio Cotman. London Montgomery up from Scranton, PA. He's starting to pick up some good offers with Rutgers, and I believe was it Michigan State maybe was another one who offered him recently. So I could keep an eye on him for an offer down the road. I know a lot of fans have been asking me about him for the longest time, and he's starting to pick up some steam. So I think this will be the best junior day of the 3. We have a lot of awesome names, I'm sure, to confirm still, but whenever we're on Tuesday, and I already have quality 4-star prospects across the board already confirmed. You got Lamont Payne, Alex Birchmeyer, Joshua Miller coming up. I mean, everything has been pointing to this weekend, and this is the weekend that Penn State wants to get all their top guys here.
Well, that means we'll be plenty busy. They're also looking at maybe hosting a class of 2022 guy. Let's close things out there. Penn State obviously not pushing a ton because space is very tight in the class of 2022, plus what they want to do in the transfer portal. But there is one guy we are still keeping an eye on and expecting to have on campus this weekend.
I asked T. Frank last week, how do you pronounce his name? Go ahead.
I don't even have a guess. I do not have a guess.
I think I'm sure we're all butchering it, and I apologize, Vega. But here's what we know. He went to Washington recently, and Washington retained its offensive line coach. Of course, he was committed to Washington previously, so the fact that Kalen DeBoer is still pursuing him, kept the offensive line coach who he was recruiting. I think that could certainly have an impact on him moving forward. But we'll see what happens there. Now, I do know UCLA is very much still in the mix. I'll be curious to see how that plays out. There was some talk about him maybe coming for a midweek visit. We'll see, to UCLA, of course. But he is expected to be at Penn State. I know Phil Troutwine flew out there on Monday night and had a good visit with him. There was mix between is Troutwine going to go out to Washington? Is he going to go see Hunter Nourzad? I was hearing mixed things on that. But we did confirm last night that he did fly all the way out to Washington for that in-home visit, which went well from what we're hearing. So we'll see, man. This is an important get. As long as they can get him here, and the fact that he's traveling here with his family, you would think that that's a very positive sign. And they obviously need offensive linemen, especially guys who could potentially play tackle. I'd like to get an accurate measurement on him to really know if he's a tackle or not, because we have him at 6'4", 280. I believe he's up to closer to 300 now, or even actually a little bit bigger maybe. So looking forward to getting an accurate measurement and trying to learn how the visit went. But Washington's very much in the mix. Penn State's still in the mix, and UCLA is trying to maybe get a midweek visit. We'll see what happens.
All right, well, stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for the latest Penn State recruiting news, Penn State football news, Penn State athletics news, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. For Ryan Snyder, I'm Greg Pickel. We will talk to you next week, and we'll see you on the message boards at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Have a good week, everyone.
I'll turn my messages off next time.